Yippee-ki-yay, mother... Merry Christmas, everybody, and welcome to my official review for the original Die Hard and the kickoff to my Die Hard review series, which will be going from now through to the end of January. This is a movie that I have been wanting so much to review for so long, but for some reason have just avoided or have just kind of found reasons not to do it. Something about reviewing your absolute favorite movies, the movies that mean the most to you, just seem like such an intimidating project. And I don't know why that is. I've done hundreds of reviews, I've done hundreds of videos, but when you start talking about doing something that means so much to me, that's so special to me, for some reason I've just always felt like I wasn't ready yet. Like I wasn't on par with being able to review Die Hard yet. Well, this year, the hell with all of that. It's time to talk about this mofo. So as a lot of you guys that have been following me for a while, or those of you that have at least seen my top 100 movies of all time video, Die Hard is my favorite film of all time. This has been my favorite movie of all time for going on about 20 years now, and I don't know if it'll ever fall from that #1 spot. There's just something about this movie, about the perfect mix of everything that it does so well, that is just endlessly entertaining to me, endlessly rewatchable, and even to this day, even just this morning, watching it again for the billionth time, I still marvel at just how fucking awesome this movie is.
Come out to the coast, we'll get together, have a few laughs.
I was actually pretty late to the party with Die Hard. For somebody that grew up watching a lot of the movies from the 80s and a lot of those, classics of that era and of the action genre, I grew up loving Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone and even Jean-Claude Van Damme and Steven Seagal when I was little. I mean, I just loved that genre, but for some reason, I just never gave Die Hard a chance. And for the life of me, I don't know what it is. I think I was just a creature of habit when I was a kid. I was one of those people where you could stack 25 movies that are proven classics in front of me that I have never seen before, right next to one film that I've watched 150 times, and I'm probably going to pick that one. So, for whatever reason, I was in my mid-teen years before I watched this movie for the first time, and it was when the fourth film, Live Free or Die Hard, was about to come out that I started to go back and watch the Die Hard movies because I knew me and my dad were going to go see the new one. He was really excited for it, and it didn't click right away. I watched the first one, I liked it a lot. I watched the second one, thought it was okay. Watched the third one, liked that one a lot, and then I really enjoyed the fourth one in theaters, despite not understanding why they made it PG-13, but for some reason, this was a movie that I just kept having the desire to go back and rewatch it. And so I watched Die Hard again. And then I'd watch it again. And then I watched it again. And I swear to God, I think there was like a month there where I watched it about 5 or 6 times because there was just always one part of the movie. I'm like, I gotta watch that one scene again. So let's just watch the whole fucking thing. And it just grew into my favorite film of all time over like a month or two. Just a movie where I'm like, why have I never experienced this before? Like, you just kick yourself in the ass, like, all these wasted years. But why do I love it? Why do I experience just absolute glee every single time I revisit this thing, no matter how many times I revisit it, which is at least once a year? Starting off with the positives for Die Hard. And spoiler alert, I don't have any fucking negatives for this movie. I might have a couple of things that I'll address that I understand why people might not like certain things, but there's nothing about this movie that I personally don't like or that I get hung up on. So, starting off the long list of positives for Die Hard, one of the biggest things that stands out about this movie that certainly stood out in 1988 when it came out is Bruce Willis as John McClane.
Got invited to the Christmas party by mistake. Who knew?
Up to that point, action heroes had to be the big bodybuilder types. They had to be the Arnold Schwarzeneggers, the Sylvester Stallones. They had to be the karate champions that are Jean-Claude Van Damme. And Bruce Willis comes in, who was a nobody for the most part in 1988, and plays this action hero, John McClane, which is just an everyday man, or average Joe in this larger-than-life situation. And this one movie and that one performance totally flipped the scale and changed everybody's perspective about what an action hero can be. No longer does it have to be this 300-pound piece of steel, this person with like muscles on top of muscles on top of muscles, somebody that could just break 3 people's necks with the palm of their hands. It could be a regular guy, just somebody that wants to rise to that occasion, somebody that has that heroic spark, somebody that can look evil and look wrong in the eye and say, no, I'm taking you bitches down.
Do you really think you have a chance against us, Mr. Cowboy? Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
And this, going forward, totally changed what we can have as action heroes. That's why we have the Jason Bournes, and we have James Bond was already kind of a hero, but he had a lot of gadgets and stuff too. But we have more modern interpretations of James Bond, like the Daniel Craig era, that I definitely think takes a lot from John McClane. There's just a whole bunch of even Mission Impossible, even Tom Cruise. He was able to have the career that he had because of a character like John McClane that paved the way and said, you can have an action hero that doesn't look like a fucking Hulk, and he can be badass, and he can be intimidating, and you would want to see him go up against Arnold Schwarzenegger, and you wouldn't quite know who would win. And what makes this character so great, aside from just that average Joe in a larger-than-life situation, is his attitude, is his humor, is his personality, the way that he talks to himself and argues with himself.
Oh, John, what the fuck are you doing? How the fuck did you get into this shit?
I promise I will never even think about going up in a tall building again.
The way that he talks shit to the bad guys and talking to him on the phone like, wrong answer, Hans, and all of that, all of those great iconic lines from John McClane, especially in this first film, but throughout most of this franchise, is just my favorite shit ever. That's what I want from an action hero. I want somebody that's so badass that even though he's scared, even though he's not necessarily guaranteed the win, even though this might be his last night on Earth, he's still gonna talk shit and he's still gonna make the bad guys feel like an asshole because I'm John McClane, bitch.
What was it you said to me before? Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
And outside of our hero, you have nothing but awesome, iconic side characters filling out this movie, namely the villain in Hans Gruber, one of, if not the greatest action villain of all time. Yet again, not this giant hulking guy that's gonna go toe-to-toe with Arnold Schwarzenegger, not this maniacal mustache twirling Blofeld type character that's gonna nuke the world. This is just a thief who is smart, who is cunning, who is charming, who is cool and calculated. And Alan Rickman nails every single aspect of this character to where you love watching him, you love listening to him. He's got like velvet in his voice to where you almost want to join his cause because he just sounds so confident. You're like, yes, whatever you say. But he's also intimidating. He's also cold. He's also ruthless. I mean, he shoots a guy right in the face as soon as he starts to give him opposition. He gets ready to kill other people. He gets ready to kill John within 1 second. He takes his wife hostage. And there's so many moments where he never loses his mind. He never loses his temper. He's never freaking out and slamming things as John's screwing up his plan. He still just maintains that composure and tries to find other ways to outthink him, to outthink the FBI, to outthink the LAPD. And if it wasn't for John McClane, he would have won because his plan is just so cunning and diabolical and genius that just every single aspect of it, to taking over this building, to not worrying about the inevitable police action, to waiting for the FBI, to using the FBI's playbook against them so they shut off the power and he can have access to the time lock safe, to blowing up the roof as a part of his plan when he's asking for helicopters to escape this situation, when in fact that's gonna be his cover to make it look like he's dead. That line that he gives at the end, why'd you have to nuke the building, Hans? Well, you steal $600, you can't exactly disappear. When you steal $6 million, they will find you unless they think you are already dead. And just the way that he says it, man, like I just get pumped thinking about it. I'm like, God damn it, John McClane. I almost wanted, like, if I was John McClane, I would have a hard time not joining this guy because I'm like, fuck, you're smart. Can I get a cut? You got Bonnie Bedelia as his wife Holly, a very integral side character and a very good character that both gives you a little bit of a little grounded humanity to John McClane, our hero, gives him a motivation to be in the building and to stay in the building. You get the whole interaction with their kids on the news at the end of the film. You have that whole situation in the final reel of the movie where he has to save her from falling, and you want them to get back together, and she's just somebody that you can tell can go toe-to-toe with John in their marriage, but at the same time is just a character that is necessary for his motivations, and it's a character that doesn't overstay her welcome. It doesn't make you feel like she's a pain in the ass and you really root for the hero, or the fact that she uses her maiden name and all of that. It makes sense. She's this smart, successful woman that challenges John, and that's almost the one flaw of the franchise, is that aside from the first two movies, and the second film kind of has the same situation as the first one where they're separated, we never really got a ton of context to their relationship. And I think that that's the one thing that this movie does so well, is building that with what they have. while at the same time kind of making us want to know more. Of course, you've got Powell, who is the guy on the ground. He is the black and white, the regular day cop in the LAPD that is on the radio talking to John, becomes best friends with him, and that's one of the best relationships in the movie and one of the best arcs in the movie as far as you wanting to see it come to that great scene in the climax of the movie where they embrace each other and hug, because they've kind of been each other's lifeline throughout this entire situation. And every time John feels down, Powell lifts him up. Every time he starts to lose hope, Powell gives him hope. Every time everybody down in the ground that's an asshole and doesn't believe in John, Powell gets in their face and brings that faith back to John. And just their interactions over a radio, two characters that we only see together for one scene, is like some of the best bromance that we've ever seen in any movie in this genre.
But nobody has no place to go. Let it snow, let it snow, let it snow. Man, God, everything is welcome to the party, pal.
Even smaller characters like the cokehead Ellis that comes in and fucks up the works for a whole scene. The Argyle, the guy that does the limo driving, that's a really integral kind of bookend to the movie. It's just such a fun character and a cool little piece that you kind of forget about throughout the movie until he shows up again in the third act, and then it's just such a fun presence to come back once again to drive John out of that situation. The movie is just crammed full of all these memorable characters, even the side characters that work underneath Hans Gruber. Some of them only last for one scene, but they're all memorable for their one scene, their one showdown with John McClane. And the action in this movie is absolutely incredible because of how grounded it is, because of how realistic it is, and because it stays within its boundaries. That's one of the things that the franchise eventually kind of lost sight of. As much as I love Part 4, it gets ridiculous beyond that point. But here you got a guy in this building with shootouts, with tight quarters fighting, where they're shooting glass to try to injure his feet. There's not like rocket launchers going. Nobody's doing backflips and bullet time in slow motion. There's hand-to-hand fighting that's real, that's visceral, that's brutal, that's very grounded and doesn't feel overly choreographed. It literally feels like two people just beating the shit out of each other trying to survive the situation. Even to the point where you get these big explosions near the end of the movie where they're blowing the roof off and John McClane has to fashion together this little rappel system with the fire hose and jumps off, and that doesn't quite work the way that he wants. It's just all these scenes and sequences and stunts that stay within the reality of this situation but are so thrilling, so exciting, and so tense all the way through the film. And one thing that this movie does not often get credit for, that is the thing that I continuously marvel more at the more that I watch it and the more that I pay attention and the more that I pick up on tiny, subtle little details, is how smartly written this script is to avoid all of the common pitfalls and common contrivances with movies like this. Every single little thing, every line of dialogue, every interaction, every single piece of this story is deliberate and is put there for a reason. Even something as insignificant as the opening of this movie where he's sitting in a plane next to a random guy that we never talk to again, and he tells him how he gets over jet lag by making fists with his toes with his socks off. Just so later on, whenever John is doing this and laughing about, holy shit, it actually works, that gives him a narrative reason to not have any shoes, which sets up a lot of the tension for the second and third act of the film when he's walking around barefoot on glass. Things like him setting up his wife and their contention with each other, and the fact that she used her maiden name, which he takes as a slight, and she took as something that she had to do to work within this Japanese business, and they have this fight over it. It's the one conversation they have before everything pops off. All of that is set up so that she has a narrative reason to be able to work alongside Hans Gruber's plan without him knowing that she is Mrs. McClane. She's Mrs. Gennaro. Things like Argyle offering to stay in the parking garage of the plaza until he hears from John on whether or not he's going to score with his wife or he strikes out so that he can either take his bags to the top or go off to another fare, and that gives him a narrative reason to be in the parking garage for the third act of the film whenever he stops the guy that's been hacking the safe the entire time and slams into the ambulance. That great heartfelt conversation that you get between John and Powell when John is at his lowest and he's pulling the glass out of his feet and he is just torn to shreds and on his last limbs, and Powell tells him the story about why he is a desk jockey and why he's not out in the street doing his thing anymore because he accidentally shot this kid in the dark that had a toy gun, and he's vowed never to raise his gun on anybody again, just for him to have to do that in the third act to save John and Holly. That's just something, it's so brilliant and so subtle the way that they set it up, because even if there's not the payoff, it's not like this scene that stands out that's like, why are we talking about this? Why are we talking about making fists with your toes? This is weird. Why are we wasting time with this? It's still entertaining. It's still a part of the story, but all of it has payoff in the end. All of it has a reason to be there. All of it has this narrative through line to some sort of explanation or some sort of destination later on in the script that escapes all of the questions about why the fuck wouldn't he have his shoes on? Why the fuck would this guy be here? Why would this happen? It all makes narrative sense because they set it all up in very creative, subtle ways throughout the movie. And I absolutely love the setting of the Nakatomi Plaza. I think that a lot of these action movies work better in small, confined spaces whenever you have that tension of seclusion. And it's not like, as much as I love movies and action movies that go all over the globe and go all over cities, it just feels tighter when it's in one location, and to the point where it just has this whole tension-filled rhythm built into the story because he has nowhere to go. He can go up a floor, he can go down a floor, but he can't leave this building. And that just creates this situation where he's got to figure out a way to get out and get everybody else out, or they're all going up in flames. To the point where I've always felt like the best thing to do with a final Die Hard movie was to do some kind of an anniversary at the Nakatomi Plaza where they're, you know, inaugurating John McClane or giving him a medal like 20 years later, 30 years later, or whatever, and have hostage situation happen again. Yes, it would be derivative. Yes, it would be kind of playing on nostalgia, but I think that would just be the best way, the most heartfelt and like love letter way to bring this whole franchise full circle for fans. But it doesn't look like we're ever going to get there. But a lot of the reason why I always wanted that to happen is because how much I love the Nakatomi Plaza as a setting for this action film. Now let's talk about this for a second, because the age-old debate of is Die Hard a Christmas movie? To be honest, I always find it to be an idiotic argument to have, especially with how passionate and how like rage-filled and blood pressure-filled people get about it. If a movie feels like a Christmas movie to you, then that's a Christmas movie. If a movie does not feel like a Christmas movie to you, then that's not a Christmas movie for you. I wish people could just understand that we all have different perspectives. But if I'm going to talk somewhat objectively, I have always argued that this movie is, in fact, a Christmas movie. And it's not just because it takes place on Christmas. That's the biggest misconception that people have about this argument. And you always see, it's almost been like a trend here this December where somebody says, oh, if Die Hard's a Christmas movie, then so is this because there's a fucking Christmas tree in one scene. No. It's not just because of that. Yes, the movie takes place on Christmas, but there's also all of the themes of a Christmas movie and a Christmas story, all of the aesthetic, all of the musical cues that you get that's woven into the score throughout the movie that are very Christmas themed. I mean, at the end of the day, if you strip away all of the intricacies of the plot and all the details, this is a story about a man trying to make it home to his family for the holidays, which in and of itself is like the classic tried and true cliche setup for a Christmas movie. There just happens to be a lot of blood and explosions and bullets put in between him and getting home for the holidays. They talk about Christmas and the season of miracles, and they use that as a plot device in certain aspects on the criminal's plot of how they're going to do this. Of course, it's taking place during a Christmas party. That's your inciting incident about how this all started and how John McClane is in this situation. You have, like I said, musical cues woven throughout the score that have like these little classic Christmas tones and Christmas beats that is actually part of the music of the film. There's the whole thing at the end where, I mean, he even wraps his final weapon, the way that he kills the bad guy, with Christmas tape on his back. This thing is just bathed in Christmas visuals and Christmas sounds and in Christmas themes. If you just take away people's mental block about you can't have an action film or you can't have a rated R film with blood and violence on Christmas. Christmas is supposed to be about PG family fun. Traditionally, yes. But non-traditionally, Die Hard is absolutely 100% a Christmas movie. Now, as I told you earlier, I do not personally have any negatives with this film. However, there is one single character in this movie that I could understand somebody taking issue with. I could understand somebody pointing at that as a big flaw in the movie or saying that that's stupid, doesn't fit with everything else that makes such narrative sense. and that's the character of Chief Dwayne, the principal from The Breakfast Club, where he comes in, he doesn't want to listen to Powell, he doesn't want to listen to McClane, he's giving them shit the entire time, he's doing every dumbass move in the book. And I could understand somebody seeing that and thinking that that character is way overly written to be this antagonistic presence against John McClane. But the way that I look at it is that he's almost political comedic relief, to where we all have supervisors and bosses and leaders that are that arrogant, that are that stuck up their own ass, that they think that every single thing that they think and want and do is the right way, is the best way, is the correct way, and nobody else can get a fucking word in with that person. We all know somebody like that, or we all have worked for somebody like that. So it is not a narrative stretch or a logic sense whatsoever for me to watch this film and think that this guy that's in charge of everybody thinks that he is smarter than everybody else and doesn't want to fucking listen to everybody, to the point where it makes him the dumbest person in the room. Oh, and I just thought about this, but before anybody says this in the comment section, the narrative reason that he changes his shirt is that he doesn't change his shirt. He's wearing a pure, clean, white wife beater and then crawls through these dirty ass vents for the entire first to second act of the film, and when he comes out, it is so grimy and dirty that it is stained brown. And you could see in certain scenes where he moves around and it is stained. It's not just suddenly a brown shirt. So that's another negative that I always see people throwing out. Like it makes the movie terrible that his fucking shirt color changes. That actually makes sense if you're paying attention. But beyond all of that, guys, I mean, I love everything about this movie. I love the characters, I love the narrative, I love the action, I love the payoff, I love the behind the scenes and how they made it and all the struggles that they got. I love the story and the legacy that it has for action movies and for Bruce Willis's career and for action heroes that will come after Bruce Willis that he paved the way for. All of that. I fucking adore this movie. I endlessly rewatch it. I watched it again this morning for the billionth time and smiled ear to ear on every single scene that I always smile ear to ear. And it's gonna take a hell of a movie to ever dethrone this. In all likeliness, I will die with Die Hard being my #1 film. I fucking love it, start to finish, top to bottom. It's the greatest action movie of all time, and for me personally, the greatest movie of all time. So if you love action films, if you love Bruce Willis, if you just love awesome movies and you for some reason have not experienced Die Hard yet, I totally understand, because I was once you, but it's time to right that wrong, especially on Christmas Day. So check this thing out, absolutely go out and buy it, because it's the best fucking movie ever. So what do you guys think of Die Hard? Are you a fan of this film? Are you not a fan of this film? Do you like one of the Die Hard sequels more? Do you think this movie is overrated? Do you think it's a Christmas movie? And actually have an intelligent conversation with that question. Don't just go off on the comments like, it's not a fucking Christmas movie, there's no Santa Claus. All the bullshit arguments that I see all the time on social media. Why does it not feel like a Christmas movie to you? Answer it that way. Let me know down below all your thoughts, guys. Hope you guys all had a very Merry Christmas and hope you have a great holidays in general. You will see me again before New Year's, but just in case you don't, have a good New Year as well. Thank you for watching. Like and share this video. Hit the subscribe button down below so you don't miss the rest of this review series, as well as all the content that I have planned for the end of this month, as well as the rest of next year. Thank you for watching once again, and as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean that you have to be.